Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Wattsburg Area School District regular board meeting for Monday, February 17th. Welcome to the Wattsburg Area School District, where we are student-centered and future-focused for a world-class education. I now call this meeting to order. May you all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May I have a roll call, please?
Present.
Mr. Brumden.
Present.
Mrs. Burlingham. Mrs. Hetherington.
Here.
Mrs. Lee.
Here.
Mr. Morvay.
Here.
Dr. Pushchak.
Here.
Mr. Williams.
Here.
Mr. Young.
Present. All right, I'll now accept a motion to approve the minutes from the February 17th regular board meeting and, the agenda from the February 17th regular board meeting, the minutes from the February 17th regular board meeting.
So moved, Hetherington.
Second, Blazer.
Any questions? Agenda and the minutes together. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Now time for school reports.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. President. This evening, we're going to have some information about the middle school. So I think Mrs. Pebbles is going to start off and tell us a little bit about service projects. And I believe she has brought a cadre of assistants with her. So the floor is yours. Yeah, that just goes.
There we go. So yes, we do have a bunch of students that are here from our sixth grade class, and I'll let them do the talking, but just a little bit of background about the project that they're going to be speaking about. At the beginning of the school year, Mr. Paris had an idea to, instead of just doing our regular clubs activities where students got to explore things within the school that they ordinarily wouldn't have, he came up with the idea of what if we get the students to impact more of the community around us. So at our building level teams and also at our department chair teams, we talked to the staff and said, what ideas do you have? What do you think that the students could be involved in that gets them to impact the world around them, that gets them to volunteer and find different things to do? And so with the help of our building teams and the help of our staff, they put together different projects that we've done throughout the year so far. And this sixth grade group is going to talk about the one that they just did before Christmas, right? Yes, before Christmas.
So this is our VA hospital project. Hope you enjoy. Alright, so what we did, we made Tide blankets. We also got toiletry accessories, and we got activities such as board games and puzzles, as well as we also made homemade ornaments.
The impact on us was that we learned creativity, compassion, and collaboration skills by doing this.
The impact on the VA hospital, an impact on them was the items that we gave them improved, affected their mental and physical well-being.
The VA hospital was so nice to us and wrote us a very nice note. It said something along the lines on they were very grateful for the Tide blankets and it helped the community very much. Now, if you guys would like a copy of the note, we have someone coming up to give you a copy of the note.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's Mr. too. Thank you anyway.
That was our VA hospital project.
So did you deliver this stuff in person? You put it together here?
Mrs. Needham, one of the other sixth grade teachers, her grandfather works at the hospital, so they
Okay.
delivered them together. Next year, we hope to take a group of students with us, but we didn't quite have the time with the weather and everything to put that together, but, so.
Well, that's really not the most important part, though. Looking at this letter, it looks like they really appreciated it,
And I think the children had a lot of fun.
yeah. It was very generous of you, Jennifer. Thank you, Ms. Burdick, for coming.
Thank you, kiddos, for coming and presenting to us. Having you out serving in the community, that's why we're here serving our student body, is to see that full circle, and we greatly appreciate it, and we know that the vets at the hospital did as well. Thank you.
And I
Mr.
do-
President?
Oh, I'm sorry.
In addition to a great job to the sixth grade students and staff, Karen O'Neill, née Karen States, is a 1988 graduate of Seneca High School.
And I do have certificates for the students as appreciation for coming up and doing the presentation too. It looks like they exited stage left already.
And they're gone.
And basketball practice happens. All right, we'll now turn our attention to Dr. Berlin for the superintendent's report. And we're going to talk about fun state budget stuff,
Yeah,
possibly?
just a couple slides. I thought I would share with everybody. The governor's budget is always, it's a starting point. Sometimes it gets better. Normally, it doesn't. There's a lot of negotiating. I should say, though, there's unexpected peaks and valleys. So some things will be changed, may be lessened, while others are propped up. But just a quick snapshot. We'll look quickly at an overview of the big pieces, the big moving parts that go into the education portion of the budget, which is, it's the largest line item. You'll see it's like 1.4 billion, I think, in the Pennsylvania budget. And then I'll talk quickly how that rolls down to the Wattsburg Area School District. In particular, adequacy and tax equity supplements, that's a new piece of the basic ed funding, which is the state funding of school districts in Pennsylvania. That started last year, and that's continuing into this year. And then I just wanted to mention what's not included. So if you take a look here, these are the major pieces of the education budget, and you can see it's a pretty big increase proposed by the governor. And just to remind everyone, this is the governor's presentation or initial budget, and then all the negotiations start from here. But this usually sets the tone for what's to come. So I highlighted just a few things. Not everything out of this table here impact us the same, so I thought I would highlight the biggest parts. And of course, this basic ed funding chunk, that's just that general piece of the pie that comes to all the school districts every year. I wish we were getting 75 million more, but that's 75 million over the whole state. But if you notice, and that's on top of $8.157 billion, so a lot of money going into education in Pennsylvania. And then special ed funding, that will impact us. We will get a portion of that increase. And then the Ready to Learn block grant, I'll show you, this is where that tax equity and adequacy supplement funding comes from. More about that in a minute. And then there is a proposed reduction in non-public charter school transportation. And I highlighted that in red because it will have some impact on us. If you're familiar with the borders of our district, we do touch quite a few other school districts, and we share a lot of our border with Erie and Mill Creek. And the law in Pennsylvania is that public schools, if you operate transportation for your public school students, you must also transport any non-public or charter school students that reside in your district to schools that are up to 10 miles outside of the school district's border by the nearest major roadway. So because of the shape of our school district, we transport quite a few students. It can be anywhere from 60 to 100 on any given year, and all over the place. Sometimes we have to drive nearly out to the peninsula to some small private schools over there that just reach that threshold. And then there's quite a few other smaller schools in and around Erie, a lot of parochial schools. And of course, the larger parochial schools, Mercier's Prep. But suffice to say, this probably will be a little bit of a decrease for us. Certainly not hugely negative, because once we get the buses out and rolling, there's a certain cost to that. So as you add another hour or two, it's not as damaging as it could be. So then this slide kind of shows you how some of this money, the proposed money, would get pushed out. And I just wanted to point out this concept of hold harmless. This has been in place in Pennsylvania for a long time. And this is the budgeting approach that no school district will receive less state funding than they did the previous year. Overall, and that's basic ed funding. So that creates situations over time where school districts that might have a declining enrollment or shifting demographic, they once may have gotten a larger portion of basic ed funding based on formulas years ago, but maybe they do not have the need for that type of spending anymore because they've shrunk, while other places in the state may have grown, and they require more resources. And that's really what has driven this whole dialogue of the basic ed funding formula. You'll hear about it from me for sure, but when we get into budgeting season, this comes up every year. And this has been an ongoing debate for probably 10 plus years. And that formula has been changed several times. They seem to be settling in on how it's going to remain. They did not change it significantly in the past 2 years. So what happens is, as new money is pushed into the budget, when you're talking about the increase that's going to come in a certain area, it gets pushed through the formula and then out to the districts as per that formula. So the more needy districts benefit more, and the districts that may have shifted, as I had changed in their needs, population, demographics, they will receive less. Now, critics of this approach, this formula, is it's the right idea, the right concept, but if you look at the amount of new money that's being flushed into the state budget every year for education and through this formula, and how that gets pushed out, it doesn't keep up with inflation for the districts that don't get large increases anymore from the formula. And then number two, it's going to take, I've seen projections, 20 to 25 years to theoretically get districts that are underfunded to where they theoretically should be. So this year, $75 million has been thrown additionally at just that basic ed funding, and that's filtered through and represented in that $225 million. And then this is what started last year, this Act 55 of 2024. There's a lot of parameters around this, but the tax equity formula, I think I have some facts about that in a second. That's designed to start to help districts that have a very high local tax effort. And then the adequacy funding looks at, again, it's a formula-driven thing where it looks at what your capacity and historic investment or in actual education cost per student has been, has compared to other districts, and then that formula pushes out a number, so a percentage of whatever new money is flushed into the budget. So there's actually a couple filters there for new money coming into the budgets. And then I just highlighted Ready to Learn block grant. The Ready to Learn block grant has been around for probably 15 some years, and it came about originally, the largest piece of it anyways was to fund full-day kindergarten. And of course, we took advantage of that at the time, as many school districts did, to move from half-day to full-day. But that's, and then there was a few other things like class size reduction. It's 3 or 4 major things you could spend the money on. And that's what it was until last year when they added these 2 other pieces. So there's actually, well, there's 2 pieces now. What used to be the Ready to Learn block grant reasons or allowable expenses have been kind of absorbed up into the adequacy category. So this tax equity supplement, don't get too excited because I know our folks bear a large burden of the tax funding effort here, the funding effort in general with property taxes, and it is supposed to benefit the top 34% of all school districts. Plans will come out. And the idea is to phase it in installments over 7 years. So that only results in 169 school districts that qualify, and unfortunately, we're not one of them. We didn't get any of this funding last year, which means we won't get any going forward because they're signaling that they're not going to change that formula. So what do we get? This chart is kind of just in a nutshell our increase over last year. I don't know if you can see that, but so this column is what we received last year, and then this is what is proposed, and then of course this is the increase of the difference. So you can see that that new money, that 74 million, we only get a very small piece. The adequacy supplement, that looks like a great number, but we've always received somewhat close to that in just the plain Ready to Learn block grant. So that's that, you know, again, that's a formula at work there that's starting to move funds towards districts that the formula is targeted because they're perceived as, or not perceived, well, in terms of the formula, they're less well-funded than others, I guess I'll put it that way. And then this last piece here, that's a pretty small increase, and that's happening across the board, across the state. All the districts are not receiving very much special education funding increase. And that's one of the largest areas where expenses grow every year. So I don't know what the thinking behind that is. It certainly is a high need area. So when you roll that all up, that's really less than what we got in an increase last year, which is not the greatest news, but I thought we should start looking at this right away. I think last year we got over a $400,000 increase. So it would seem that the new formulas, if they stick with this approach, are going to start to lean out budgets. And that was another big portion of debate when it comes to the basic ed funding formula that they hashed over for years, and it's probably the sixth or seventh iteration of it that I've seen. It is that you can't really bring up the neediest districts without really hurting other districts. So they're trying to do this balancing act between hold harmless, which is keep the water level where it's at so no one goes under, while trying to take ballast, I guess, out of other people's boats and have them float higher in the harbor. That's the best analogy I can think of on the spot. But that's where that tax equity supplement comes in as well. So overall, I think everyone was a little bit disappointed. The Governor Shapiro was talking about a much more substantial increase. Now, there's two things noticeably missing, and I'll end my presentation with that. Two major items: the basic ed funding lawsuit, no mention of that whatsoever. So we don't know where that's at the moment, but it's still alive and kicking. Part of me suspects that they may start, now they have a foothold with the adequacy funding formula and that tax equity formula. Maybe they'll start to put more money into that mechanism to right the ship. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that, we have split political parties that very evenly matched in the House and the Senate for the most part, and they're very divided on what version of fair to use, I guess, when it comes to distributing the $5 billion worth of funding that settlement has claimed directed the state to correct. And then the other thing I thought was interesting that's missing is the cyber charter school reimbursement that was implemented for this year. And it's not a huge amount when you look at what school districts spend, but we thought it was a step in the right direction. That has been taken off the table. It's not in this particular proposal. Now, it doesn't mean when they get into it that the legislature wouldn't bring some form of that back, but right now, Governor Shapiro has taken that off the table, and he's put back in the concept of a cap for cyber ed students, cyber charter education students, of $8,000 per regular ed student. And then there is a cap too for special ed students, but that would be subject to a sliding scale based on need. And again, there's another formula there. Regardless, that would be very beneficial. We probably have about 55 students in cyber right now, cyber charters that are operated privately. That's costing about $1.3 million. So that just continues to consume an enormous amount of the budget every year. So I guess I'll stop there. I sat through quite a few presentations, and there's a lot to digest, but I thought you might appreciate just kind of seeing the bottom line. You know, what has the governor proposed? What might we get? And again, it's probably best case scenario, unless there's some horse trading that goes on to increase certain areas more than others. So I'll stop there. Any comments or questions, discussion?
Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. Neuser?
Dr. Berlin, could you explain the section you were talking about with the 169 school districts that are going to be seeing a more significant increase? There's something on that page that talked about like the top 30% or something of districts. Can you explain how those 169 districts are selected and what makes us ineligible?
Well, you and I don't. It's that 34% cutoff. That's what they use, and they're looking at the districts, the 34% of the districts with the highest local tax effort across the state. So we're not in that 34%. I looked. We're in the middle. We're about 50%.
Are there any local districts that end up in that range? Because
I don't know. I didn't look. There was a list, but I just scanned it really quickly to see how many and where we were.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, Dr. Berlin, I have a question. I know you mentioned, and I know it's, you might not know, but the basic ed lawsuit, wasn't there a time limit that they had to abide by paying that certain amount of money? Wasn't there because am I correct that they didn't give us a whole lot last year out of that lawsuit, and now we're going on year 2 of it still.
Right.
And then to follow up, do you feel as though that will come as a benefit, a lump sum, or are they going to like legislate that out as in, hey, here's this money, and then we're going to snag this one off the table? I'm just foreseeing 3 or 4 years down the road from now.
Yeah. It was supposed to be done in a timely fashion. There wasn't a hard deadline, but I know that the judge had weighed back in last year when the legislature didn't do much, and the parties that won, they could petition the court to put some urgency back into this thing. But then it becomes a question, I think, in court world of how much is enough to show that you're making progress. And that's kind of where, and I think that's what you're saying. Are they just going to start to dribble out pieces maybe? And I think that is very probable. There's a high likelihood. Not that I'm, a gambler, but I could see them starting to take chunks of that money as the court twists their arm, but then arguing about how that is going to get distributed. I had like 2 or 3 spreadsheets that were put out as original proposals based on the findings of the committee that had to work on determining how much was unfunded over time when the court said, hey, you've not met your constitutional obligation here. And those benefited our district and many other districts like us in a higher manner than some of these other mechanisms that are being squeezed, meandered into the budget, like the tax adequacy, or the adequacy supplement, the tax equity supplement. So I hope I'm making sense. I could see them starting to take larger pieces of money and filter them through those new budgetary devices simply because that's all they can agree on right now. So, but again, that's, you asked kind of a hypothetical, and I'm just kind of giving you my opinion.
It just, you throw out numbers like $12 billion, and it's like, when is that going to get, here?
Big numbers, yeah. I saw the projection, the proposed formula, one of a couple, they were all 5-year formulas. And when I saw those, I thought, boy, any one of those is going to be extremely beneficial to us. Because those formulas are different, and we would benefit not because our sparsity combined with the fact that we have a high local tax effort, even if it's not 34%. The other formulas looked at those two things in tandem, and which I think, in my opinion, is more fair.
Any other questions? I will beg the pardon of this governing body and everyone here. I skipped over in my agenda. I was so excited to hear about the summation of the proposed budget. Any guests or citizens that have signed up to speak this evening?
There was none that had signed up, so.
All right, thank you very much. We'll now move on to the Business Administrator's Report. Are you filling in this evening, Dr. Berlin?
I will fill in the best that I can. Actually, Mrs. Bendig had went through quite a bit of this last week. Some of the bill lists were not ready, so those are, the latest are on there for board review. I do have a note in the treasurer's report in 5A, the cafeteria profit loss. If you had a chance to look at that particular report, there's a large deficit, and that's due to the fact that we purchased new serving lines at the elementary, a lot of stainless steel, and the new combi ovens. So that was about $125,000 approximately. And those were known expenditures. As you've seen over time here, the cafeteria fund is quite healthy. A lot of that has to do with the fact that we're school-wide community eligibility. So the cafeteria is producing profit more often than not, and the state doesn't permit that to go on forever. So we are taking advantage of that to invest in some equipment and make the cafeterias better to serve the students better. And then in 7C, Finance, the budgetary amendment, just a note that adds the facility improvement grant money to our general fund budget. So if we didn't show that extra revenue and make an amendment, it would look like the budget is overspent, next year when we go through the local audit. So that's just a bit of standard accounting to show that we didn't budget for it originally in the budget that was passed by the board in June, but we've added that revenue in since we know that the grant has been awarded and the funds that will be expended along with that. So those are my notes for the budget section.
Are there any questions on the Business Administrator's Report or any of the attachments included in the agenda? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the business report, payments, and invoices as presented.
So move, Pushcheck.
Nicole, second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Under legal advisement for this evening, I have two. The first is the ARP ESSER Health and Safety Plan Biannual Review. I'll entertain a motion for approval of that biannual review.
Morvay, so moved.
Blazer, second.
Any questions regarding the Health and Safety Plan Biannual Review? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The second one is an addendum this evening for a student discipline matter. This is to approve an in lieu of expulsion agreement for a Wattsburg area middle school student. Could I entertain a motion to carry that in lieu of expulsion agreement?
So move, Pushcheck.
Nicole, second.
Any questions on that discipline action? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. I will now turn the floor over to Dr. Pushjack for finance.
Thank you, Mr. President. 3 items under finance for the board's consideration tonight. Without objection, I would like to move all 3 together, and those 3 are as follows. 7A is budgetary transfers, 7B is fund transfers, and 7C is the budgetary amendment in the note that Dr. Berlin made about that. 7ABC, so moved.
Nicole, second.
Any questions on the items under finance for this evening? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Dr. Pushjack.
That's all we have for finance. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir. For building and grounds, we have Mr. Jeremy Blazer.
I have nothing this evening, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Blazer. For personnel, we have Mrs. Nicole Lee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have, I believe, 6 items for tonight, and without objection, I'd like to move all in one motion. They include A, service substitute list additions as listed, B, appointments as listed, C, resignations as listed, D, leave requests as listed, E, conference requests as listed, as well as F, an addendum on tuition reimbursement as listed. So moved.
Second, Pushcheck.
Any questions on any of the items as presented? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Opposed, nay? All right. Motion carries. Under policy, filling in for Mrs. Burlingham this evening will be Mr. Williams.
Mr. President, I have one thing under policy, and that is the first reading of policies. You can see that there are 16 different summary that will be changing. So move, Jesse Williams.
Second, Blazer.
Any questions on the first reading of the policies listed? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Williams. Next, under curriculum, we have Mr. Stephen Morvay.
Mr. President, there are 3 items to be brought before the board this evening. If there's no objection, I'll move all 3 as one motion. First item under curriculum is item 11A, which is the adoption of the 25-26 school calendar. The next item is item B, the therapeutic social emotional classroom agreement between Wattsburg Area School District and Sarah A. Reed Children's Center. And the third item is an addendum item, which is an alternative education for disruptive youth services agreement between Wattsburg Area School District and Bethesda Lutheran Services per the attachments. So moved.
Nicole,
Second,
second.
please.
Any questions on the items presented under curriculum? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion's carried. Thank you, Mr. Morvay.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Now for transportation, Mr. Greg Brummagem.
Technology first?
Oh, sorry.
I have nothing
Technology.
tonight, Mr. President.
Already had you.
I'm such a
Thank
good
you,
pitch
Mr.
hitter,
Williams.
you know, it's.
Yes,
Understand how
thank you. Mr. Brummagem, thank you.
Mr. President, I have one for tonight underneath transportation to approve the transportation request and ratification of field trips since last meeting as attached. So moved.
Second, Blazer.
Any questions on the transportation requests? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Now we'll turn over for athletic and extracurricular to Ms. Lee Hetherington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have 3 items, and without objection, I would like to move them all together. The first one is a volunteer list, which is to approve the volunteers listed. Athletic appointments, that is to approve Ms. Lipinski as the softball head coach. And the third one is extracurricular appointments, which is to approve Ms. Kerr as the SAP case manager. So moved.
Nicole, second.
Any questions on the appointments as listed? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Under miscellaneous for this evening, we have a approval for the solicitation and sale of educational tourist trip to Europe with travel dates July 9th to 19th, obviously providing that all the criteria of Policy 913 is met for a non-school organizational or group trip. I will entertain a motion for those travel services solicitation to be approved.
So moved. Bushcheck.
Second, Heatherington.
Are there any questions on this one? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We'll now turn it over to Mr. Stephen Morvay for the Erie County Technical School Joint Operating Committee report.
Mr. President, this is the summary of the meeting that we held back in January. So the first item that is noted, we'd like to address or highlight any of the students that are singled out by the tech school. And the first one is Logan Uhl. He's under computer programming. And then Brianna Noonmaker, early childhood education. And then Troy Hall was under precision machining. Those are three students that were recognized in December for their Beatitude program. So we'll have another report in February for the January students as well. Just as a couple of reminders, on the 27th of this month, you should have all received an invitation to that Board of 99 luncheon. So that's open to all board members between all 11 districts, and that'll be roughly, I think it's around noon, there at the tech school on the 27th. The other highlighted items that we discussed, we did approve the allowing the technical school to apply for the grant for the solar project that I think I'd mentioned before in the past. That would be currently, it's a 500 kilowatt facility, which would be roughly carry a $1.3 million cost totally. And then with grants and some other state funding and whatnot, as well as some tech school dollars, that would be basically, there'd be no district costs, so there'd be no additional capital improvement costs for any of the 11 districts to bear. And then roughly, if that would go forward, they're showing that as a potential payback in about 5 years. But again, this is just the approval for the grant application. It has nothing to do yet with the system or the facility or even any of the program or even of the company that right now that would be providing that facility. We also approved a lease for the Erie Community College to lease about 17,000 square feet of the Skills Building. That's one of the adjacent buildings to the main technical campus, and that is a 10-year lease so that Erie County Community College can use the facilities there. There may be some questions about that, but essentially, if the community college wanted to do any renovations or anything internally inside the building, they'd be responsible for all of that. The technical college would only be really responsible for basically the outside and the shell and the warm and dry shell, essentially. If anybody's a landlord, they know their responsibilities. The internal is usually taken care of by the tenant. So that was approved as well. We then also, as I mentioned, the heavy equipment program, that is now on board. It has been approved. It'll become live in the fall of 2026. And if you recall, that was going to be the heavy equipment operators and repair program. That'll start in the fall of 2026. And then the largest item that we really discussed was, which then I need to go back to the Joint Operating Committee here in February, here in the next couple weeks, will be the budget. And the Erie County Technical School proposed the budget essentially, and I'll try to do some summary points. Basically, it's a little over 3% aggregate increase over last year, and that's the district, all the district contributions. And again, when I say that in aggregate, it's because each individual district will have a component or a portion of that increase. Some districts actually go down, some districts go up based upon usually their enrollment. And in our case, for their projection for the 2025 school year was our contribution actually would go down from this current year based upon the average enrollment and based upon now the new total enrollment that's allowed. And so therefore our percentage of use, if that's an easier way to look at it, actually is reduced. And so therefore our contribution is reduced. But again, overall, it's about a 3% increase in total for their budget. They were also going to include, if you recall, part of the agreement for the addition and renovation that just completed was to create a capital improvement fund. And so that's going to be a continuing allotment each year that has been allocated. So there are funds that are going to the capital improvement fund now, year over year, as we go forward. And then, again, as I indicated, our enrollment is a little bit less as a percentage of use of the facility. So those are kind of some quick synopsis. There's certainly a lot more detail and a lot more information regarding the budget. There may have been, I think Dr. Berlin may have included in one of the updates, maybe the proposal, if I recall. I thought that was distributed around. So if folks had any questions or comments on that, I might be able to give a little more insight. But that's the largest portion. And then we'll go back in our February meeting, which here is again in a couple weeks, and we'll present that back to the board for final adoption and submission to the state. So that's all I have, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Morvay. Any questions for Mr. Morvay on his tech report? Thank you very much for your time and for serving on the Joint Operating Committee and continuing that moving forward. I have a student who just got his accepted plaque in the
Very good.
mail, nicely
Excellent.
printed. He's excited, ready to see what it holds next year. So we're excited for that as well. I will now recognize Dr. Andy Pushchak for the Northwest Tri-County Intermediate Unit report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Not too much to report in addition to the board report that Mr. Berlin included in the weekly update. I too attended the IU budget presentation last week, and I was going to report on that, but as a courtesy, we usually wait until the superintendents hear the budget presentation as well as the business administrators as well. That's kind of the order we go: board, superintendent, business administrator. So I'll report briefly on that. In the interim, I may send out an executive summary of the IU budget presentation after it's presented to Mrs. Bending. So nothing else from IU. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Dr. Pushchak, and we'll look forward to that summary and staying abreast of the budget as it moves through this year, just like it does every year, and hopefully sooner rather than later. So are there anything for board correspondence and dialogue this evening from anyone? Ms. Hetherington?
Yes. I just want to bring up, in light of the bazillion weather cancellations we've had this year, I work at a private school, and many of the teachers have kids that go to other schools, and they have not had to make up any snow days this year because the first couple days were like emergency, state of emergency kind of situations, and the other ones are all called virtual days. Why do we not have the capability of having virtual days?
Dr. Berlin?
Yes, so we've looked at that before, and we could apply for up to 5 of those per year. And administratively, we've always paused because when we look at the high-speed internet saturation, it's not great. If you look on the FCC site, it shows about 85%, but when you break that down into hotspots versus DSL versus fiber, there's definite zones. And that's why during the pandemic, we ended up spending a lot of the ESSER money on the hotspots to try to give everybody something. So that's a concern. And then a second concern is younger students, especially kindergarten, first grade, second grade. We get into a discussion about, isn't it better to bring them in for days that they miss rather than just leave them work on the computers? So that's kind of an academic discussion we get into, what's best for the students. And then a third thing is just like practicality. I know we call the snow day coming out of a break, or if you call it coming out of a weekend, not all the students have their laptops and things with them. So it's certainly something we could apply for, and PDE would probably approve us, but those were just the reasons that we administratively haven't really pursued it.
Other thoughts? It's a tough spot.
We've had, this has been a tough winter, and I think we got spoiled with the, was it El Nino? I always forget which one brings us the altered jet stream and the more mild, wetter winters, but I was looking back through some of my memos that I've sent out to parents. 2015 was the beginning of the polar vortex years. I remember them as where it was like minus 30 degrees, and we were really struggling with, you know, how cold is too cold. And I know the board was a lot different composition at that time, but superintendents, we had got together with Tom DeVecchio and we looked at wind chill charts, and that's where a lot of the guidelines that are on our website, that's where those came from. It was a collaborative effort with local meteorologists, superintendents meeting. But yeah, we haven't really had to get into snow days and delays for some time.
Thank you. I think it was a valid question, and I appreciate the response. The first hurdle, high-speed internet, you mentioned 85% as a statistic. Is that 85% of our district that doesn't have it, or is that actually correlate to our population of our student body, 85%? Would that be a different number?
Yeah, we haven't pulled the student body in a while. We did that at one point, and it was a very low number. But we could do that again, because it's very possible that even though the aggregate is low, that perhaps the family count is high, and we could look at that.
Well, and there has been quite a bit of physical expansion.
Yeah.
At least, and I don't know, you know, I'm not in the Green Township or Greenfield area, but at least Venango Township and, you know, East Green, we've seen a lot of physical infrastructure go in with fiber, but we don't know if people are actually hooking up to it, which is the tricky part of that. And I'm just curious, you know, obviously I'd love to see us apply to be able to do virtual days, but ultimately we have to understand, is that going to be a functional alternative where we feel like we're giving everything we can for our students, and we really need to just lay back into that statistical data and say, is it updated? Is it reflective of who's hooked up within our student population? And that may even be other ways to come up with that answer.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on that. You know, just because it exists doesn't mean everyone buys it. So the way to obviously get accurate numbers, we can easily do a survey.
Absolutely.
Well,
Go ahead, Mr. Brennan.
in this circumstance, we're talking about weather-related. You know, just a few years ago, you know, it wasn't weather-related that we weren't in school, right? We had a pandemic, and different schools across Pennsylvania, across the country, responded and reacted differently. I have clients all over the state, all over different states, and there were schools that, because they were already moving that way, completely different geographical location than ours, completely different. The high-speed internet is a valid problem that we have to overcome. But I think in today's world, you know, it's a multifaceted, you know, technological approach that we have to keep thinking on. If we ever have something again, are we going to be right back where we were? You know, if we made any strides to confer school continuation in an extreme circumstance again. So I think it's worthy of researching further. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hetherington, Mr. Bremagen, Mr. Berlin. Are there any other questions on that or any other items for discussion this evening?
Mr. President.
Dr. Pushjack?
Thank you. I just found it interesting that approximately half of the school districts in Pennsylvania have a higher local tax burden than we do. I know that we think ours is high.
Yeah.
We don't even make the list, and that's discouraging in one way and a constant challenge in another way. But relatively speaking,
Absolutely.
Half the school districts are worse off than we are in those communities. Just an interesting point. Thank you.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting when you start breaking down the way the trickle downs work and how that separates out by highest local tax funding districts. It's a wild number. Are there any other items for discussion this evening? I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second, Heatherington? Is it a second or
Who
move?
moved?
So move?
Who
So
moved
move?
it?
She moved
You're
it, I'll
moving
second.
it? You're seconding it?
All right.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.